Hey everybody, this is Blake here, and welcome to my review of Getaway, the most anticipated film of the summer. Am I right? You guys are all really looking forward to seeing this one. Screw Man of Steel. Fuck Iron Man 3. It's all about Getaway. In all seriousness, this was a movie that when I first saw the trailer, I thought it looked like it could be pretty cool, but then it probably wouldn't be. While I was watching the trailer, just all these different warning signs were going off that suggested that Getaway would be a pretty bad film. But it was, at least I thought, a well put together trailer, and it made me somewhat interested in the project. Plus, I really do like Ethan Hawke. Even though I've always thought he was a pretty good actor, it seemed like in the past he just didn't choose a whole lot of projects that appealed to my taste. Whereas these days he's doing horror movies, and I just think that's awesome. And I love how, even though he's doing films which he might consider to be beneath him, like Sinister, he's always giving it his all, and I really do respect that. But of course, the reviews for Getaway were released, and everybody unanimously hated this movie. Last I checked, it had a 0% on Rotten Tomatoes, and even Paranoia didn't have a 0% on Rotten Tomatoes. I haven't seen Paranoia, but God, that must be really bad if that's comparable to this. Is Getaway as bad as the critics are saying it is? In some ways, yes. In other ways, no. It does a few things pretty well, but then it does more things really poorly. But personally, I actually think it's actually very fitting that this summer, which is filled with so many disappointing movies, which just let me down so much, would end with one of the biggest pieces of shit of the year. God, where do I even begin with this? Okay, well, let's start with the story. There isn't really much of a plot. You can pretty much guess everything that happens based on the trailers. Ethan Hawke is a former race car driver whose wife gets kidnapped, and he gets a call from John Voight, who was the person who orchestrated all of this, and he says, you have to do what I say if you want to ever see your wife again. And so he starts to, but along the way he gets carjacked by Selena Gomez, although in a twist I will admit that I didn't see coming. She isn't carjacking him. She's actually the original owner of the car, and somebody else had stolen it and ordered Ethan Hawke to drive it, so she just wants her car back. But eventually she's forced to get in on this too, and so they have to do all these things in order to ensure that Ethan Hawke's wife survives. Well, it's just really Ethan Hawke driving around. Most of the time it seems like the villain's motives are he's just being a total dick. Now, he actually does have a real plan, but you don't know that until later in the movie. So just like he's saying, okay, now drive through this crowd and stuff like that. But really, in terms of twist, even though there is kind of a final reveal that I kind of saw coming, but it was okay, it felt like it would have been more impressive in another movie that actually had a plot. But because this film is just Ethan Hawke driving around a lot and running away from cops, it really diminished whatever impact it could have had. But what does stand out in a bad way is how the story is told. Now, the first scene is Ethan Hawke's walking into his house, and he sees the place is all trashed up. His wife has obviously been kidnapped. Okay, I like that it's immediately getting into the action, but then it, how do I explain it? It jumps forward to when he's stealing the car, and then he starts flashing back again to this previous scene, like literally the scene before, where he's looking for his wife. But then it shows that he gets the call and John Voight starts talking to him, and then it's like flashing back to just real quick shots of his wife being happy and stuff like that. I'm thinking, why are they really jumbling up all these scenes? Why couldn't they just been very linear? Have him walk into the room, get the call, and then, next scene he's getting the car. I don't really get why they're mixing all of this up. Just because your story is not being linear, that doesn't automatically make it artistic. Pulp Fiction, this is not. So that was strange, but also I really felt this movie would have been so much better if it didn't jump immediately into the action. And that really surprises me, because if there's one thing that I'll give Getaway is that it doesn't waste a whole lot of time. Even though there is a lot of padding in that he'll start flashing back to previous scenes of the movie for absolutely no reason. But otherwise, I do respect that just pretty much non-stop action. But still, if it should have opened with, his situation. He's a former race car driver who had fallen on hard times, and he had started working with the wrong kind of people, fell in love with this girl, and decided to settle down. I'm not saying show all of that in the first 30 minutes or so, but start out where he's settling down, and maybe talk a little bit about what he did in the past. But make us care for these characters, make us understand who they are. Why should we care that the wife has been kidnapped? The film never really gives us a reason other than the fact that, I don't know, we're supposed to care. I want to know who these people are, which would make the situation they find themselves stuck in that much more engaging. A film that I thought had kind of a similar premise, albeit it was completely different in other ways, was Eagle Eye with Shia LaBeouf. At least that film, it wasn't great either, but at least that film I thought had a much stronger story in that we at least knew these people before they get dragged into the plot. Instead, no, they immediately get pulled into the plot, and then as time goes along, they'll occasionally reveal some exposition about their backstories. That was kind of lazy. And so then when the action does pick up, it's just that much more intense because we care for the characters, and we aren't so bored of all these different car chases. Now, that's the other thing is, the car chases, whether they're good or bad, I'm not going to reveal which yet, they just get old after a while. It feels like you just start watching the same scene over and over again. There's just not a whole lot of diversity. And I shit you not when I'd say 80 to 85% of this film is just Ethan Hawke driving away from the cops, driving through a crowd. It just becomes tiring and exhausting. Not quite a Good Day to Die Hard exhausting, but still, it really started to diminish its own entertainment value because it just becomes so monotonous. Character-wise, there's not really a whole lot to say. One thing also, if they'd shown more of the characters in the first act and just fleshed them out a little bit, it would have given Ethan Hawke something to do. Ethan Hawke, I do really think he does the best he could with this kind of role, but this role doesn't really require a whole lot of acting. It's just him shifting gears, kind of looking intense. He's really wasted in this kind of role. I mean, I was talking to my dad, who I saw this with. He thought Jon Voight was wasted, but I didn't mind that just because I thought Jon Voight did make a good voice. You don't really see any of him throughout the bulk of the movie, but he has such a menacing voice that I felt he had more to do, and he just, once again, is a voice, whereas Ethan Hawke is the character we're supposed to be following, but he has no material to work with. So that character was kind of boring. Oh, and Selena Gomez. Okay, I'm not really familiar with this chick. I believe she did High School Musical or some shit like that, and this was supposed to be her breakthrough role that could show general audiences that she could be taken seriously as a dramatic actress. I will say that I didn't think she herself did bad. She has a few off moments, but so does Ethan Hawke, and I don't really blame them as much as I blame the writing there. But one thing too with Ethan Hawke is I felt occasionally like he tries to be kind of funny, and to me it just kind of threw the tone off. But enough about that. But with Selena Gomez, her character is just really, really obnoxious. She's just constantly bitching, she's constantly whining, and at times I was just hoping that Ethan Hawke would just punch her out. I feel bad for thinking that way, but that's how obnoxious she was. But you can't, as good, whether she did good or bad, there's just not a whole lot you could do with a character like that. Now, I do like how the character is portrayed to be really intelligent. In fact, throughout the film you get the impression that her character is smarter than Ethan Hawke's character, but still it doesn't make up for the annoyingness whenever she opens her mouth. So yeah, that's that. And then the wife, she has no real characterization at all. She's just kind of a MacGuffin. So yeah, in terms of story or character or acting, the film is nothing special. It's at worst bad, at best really average. The action scenes, well, this is obviously what the film is really relying on. Let me say this, the stunt work was pretty good, maybe even great. I was really impressed with some of the car crashes and the carnage that these chase scenes causes, because it all looks very real. I didn't notice any CGI, and a lot of these scenes, they actually looked very dangerous to film. So that should be good, right? That should be good, right? I don't know why I screwed up that sentence. Well, this unfortunately has the same problem that A Good Day to Die Hard had, but it's not quite as magnified. You see, A Good Day to Die Hard I thought had phenomenal stunt work, much better than what this film had. But the difference is, A Good Day to Die Hard, the action scenes were just so poorly filmed and poorly edited that it took any enjoyment you could have had from these action scenes. And this film is kind of like that, but the stunt work isn't as good, and the camera work and editing isn't as bad. I could at least usually make out what was going on. There were a few times where I thought the editing really did drop the ball, though, especially near the ending. There's this one shot where the bad guy's driving away, and they have this tracking shot. Well, it is a tracking shot. It looks like it was done in one take as they're picking up speed and dodging all these cars. And I kept thinking, okay, Ethan Hawke's just going to come out of nowhere and sideswipe him. It doesn't happen. Instead, the guy just turns, and then suddenly Ethan Hawke is behind him again. That was a very incoherent scene. And then the finale where, you know, the car crashes ultimately, it was just so poorly done that I didn't even realize the bad guy's car crashed too. But otherwise, I could have enjoyed these action scenes if it wasn't for the fact that the film stock or whatever just kept changing. I really wish I knew how to explain the different film techniques. I don't understand which cameras are which. I never memorized all the different lenses. It's something I really should do. But like at times, at first, especially early on, I was under the impression that a lot of these angles were done from the point of view of the cameras which were installed in the car, because this Mustang, which is also like armored and stuff like that, has a bunch of cameras installed throughout it, so the villains could see what he's doing. So at first I'm like, okay, that's kind of an interesting gimmick. It's paranormal activity on wheels, but I'm fine with that, I guess. And it's not done that through all the camera work. This isn't a found footage type movie, don't get me wrong. There's a lot of conventional shots too, but so I was expecting, you know, I figured that was why it would suddenly, the quality of the film would suddenly feel like you're watching security footage. But then it starts showing us angles that could not be the cameras from the car. You know, at times I'm thinking, okay, are these still other cameras that, you know, were installed throughout the city? I never really got that impression. So it just, for absolutely no reason, you're going from normal movie footage to what looks like, I guess, high quality security footage, but security footage all the same. And at times, like, the film stock would become so bad that it pretty much obscures any kind of image within the film. So it's like Ethan Hawke becomes, you know, like his like skin almost looks completely white. The lighting is very over the top, so it almost makes it difficult to watch for that reason. I'm really struggling explaining myself, but if you've seen the movie, you probably understand what I'm talking about. But and to me, whenever it would cut to one of these scenes where the film quality would just suddenly drop, it just really made the action scenes incredibly unappealing on an aesthetic level. So in the end, I really could not bring myself to enjoy the action scenes, even though the stunt work is, I thought, really impressive. Honestly, most of the film I kept thinking this looked like a direct-to-DVD, or a film that should have been released direct-to-DVD. But at the same time, I will concede that, you know, the car crashes and all that kind of stuff, it definitely has better production values than your usual direct-to-DVD flick. So that's one thing going for it, but it did not use its production values very well. What's strange is that the guy who directed this, he's primarily known for doing Dungeons and Dragons, which came out like 10 years ago. That film was so bad it's good, based on what people tell me. I've seen it, but it's been so long that I don't remember it. And then he also did An American Haunting, which was just really mediocre. And this film, I'd say, is half mediocre, half bad. At no point did I ever thoroughly enjoy myself. Like I said, occasionally I'd be like, hey, that was actually pretty cool. But then that would be followed with either Selena Gomez talking, or just more monotonous driving, or just another poorly edited or shot action sequence. And so yeah, to me, this was not really worth watching. I wouldn't have minded if I'd seen this on DVD. And honestly, if this looks interesting to you in any way, I just wait till it gets released on DVD or Netflix or something like that. I would not go to the theaters and see this. I would not pay money, or at least I'd pay as little money as possible. So yeah, that's really all I have to say, I think. the guy who also the guy who directed this, I think he's become more known as a producer, and he actually has done some decent stuff. After Dark Films usually produces horror movies, and I actually recognized a lot of the films he had produced, such as Perkins 14, was that it? And that was just okay. Most of those kinds of movies from After Dark Studios is just okay, and I hated El Gringo, which he also produced. But then I loved Universal Soldier: Day of Reckoning, or I didn't love it, but I at least liked it. So he's done some good stuff, some bad stuff as a producer, but unfortunately as a director, I just don't think he has a lot of talent. So yeah, avoid Getaway. It is probably the worst film of the summer. I'm not sure if I want to say it's the worst film of the year. I don't know if I hate this movie more or less than Die Hard 5. I'd probably say in a lot of ways this movie is worse, but I think Die Hard 5 made me angrier. So I guess I'd probably say, if I had to watch one or the other right now again, I'd probably say Getaway. But that's all I've got. I did written reviews of You're Next, which is better than Getaway, so read that and watch that video. I did a written review of The Prodigal Son, which is a Sammo Hung and Yuen Biao movie. I don't know if I'm pronouncing his name right, but it's a kung fu flick, and that's another one you should probably see if you like kung fu movies, so read that review too. That is all I've got. I'll see you guys later.